The monitors beeped their steady rhythm, one mechanical heartbeat for every real one she couldn't feel. Elena Vance lay motionless in the hospital bed, her silver hair spread across the pillow like spilled mercury, her face slack as melted wax, her eyes sealed shut against the fluorescent light bleeding through her lids. The doctors had already pronounced their verdict: massive stroke, severe brain damage, persistent vegetative state. They spoke in hushed, clinical tones, their words floating above her bed like birds she could hear but never touch. They were certain she was gone. They were wrong. Elena heard everything. She heard the soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes against tile, the scratch of pen against clipboard, the whispered consultations just outside her door. She heard the monitors translating her existence into electrical pulses, reducing 73 years of life to a series of beeps and digital readouts. She heard her own breathing, shallow, mechanical, assisted by tubes she could feel but not see. She was alive. She was conscious. She was screaming inside a body that had become her coffin. The stroke had hit 36 hours ago, a lightning bolt in her brain that severed the connection between thought and action. One moment she had been reviewing Foundation reports at her desk, the autumn light falling golden across the papers. The next moment she was drowning in her own skull, every nerve on fire, her body crumpling like paper in a fist. Now she existed in the space between. She could think with perfect clarity. She could feel the scratch of hospital sheets against her skin, the too cold air from the vent above her bed, the dull ache in her lower back from lying motionless for so long. She could smell the antiseptic and the wilting flowers someone had left on the windowsill. She could hear every word spoken in her presence, but she could not move. She could not speak. She could not open her eyes or wiggle her fingers or make any sound at all. Her body had become a locked room, and she was trapped inside with no key, no window, no door. Diminished function across all measurable indicators. A voice said, male, clinical, probably Dr. Peterson. She recognized the nasal quality of his speech, the way he swallowed certain consonants. We're looking at palliative options at this point. Palliative. The word landed like a stone in still water. Palliative meant comfort care. Palliative meant they had given up. Family has been notified. The nephew, he's listed as next of kin, should be here within the hour. Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to rise up from this bed and tell them she was still here, still fighting, still alive in every way that mattered. She wanted to grab Dr. Peterson by his starched white coat and demand real treatment, real tests, real attention. She wanted to tell them about the Vance Foundation, about 40 years of work, about scholarships and community centers and families pulled back from the brink. She wanted to tell them that she mattered, but her body refused to obey. Every command she sent dissolved somewhere between her brain and her muscles, lost in the damaged wiring of her nervous system. She was a general with no army, a conductor with no orchestra, a voice screaming into a void that swallowed every sound. The door opened and closed. Footsteps receded. She was alone again with the beeping monitors and her own trapped thoughts. Elena had built the Vance Foundation with her husband Richard in the early years of their marriage. They had started with a single scholarship, $5,000 for a local student who couldn't afford college, and grown it into something larger, something meaningful. Community centers in underserved neighborhoods, crisis grants for families facing eviction, job training programs, after-school tutoring, a web of support that spread across Connecticut and beyond. After Richard died, she had poured herself into the work even more deeply. The foundation became her purpose, her identity, her reason for getting up each morning. She had no children, a choice she had made decades ago, a door she had closed and locked and refused to think about. The foundation was her legacy. The foundation was her meaning. And now she was going to lose it all because she couldn't move her hand. The monitors beeped on, indifferent to her despair. Time passed strangely in the darkness behind her eyes. Minutes stretched into hours or compressed into seconds, she couldn't tell which. The light through her eyelids shifted from bright to dim to bright again. Nurses came and went, adjusting tubes, checking readouts, speaking about her as though she were furniture. She heard fragments of conversation, caught glimpses of a world continuing without her. Such a shame. The Vance Foundation does good work. Did good work. Past tense now, I suppose. The nephew's taking over. Board meeting tomorrow. Elena felt something cold spreading through her chest. Not physical cold, but the cold of understanding. The cold of knowing that her life was being dismantled while she lay helpless to stop it. She had spent 73 years building something she thought would outlast her. A legacy carved into the world, proof that she had existed and mattered. But now, trapped in this bed, she understood the terrible truth. Legacy meant nothing if there was no one to protect it. And there was no one. There was only Martin, her nephew, Richard's sister's son, a man she had watched transform from an entitled child into an entitled adult, from a sulking teenager into a smiling predator. She had brought him onto the foundation board 5 years ago against her better judgment, family loyalty. She had told herself the importance of keeping the organization within the bloodline. She knew now what that decision would cost. The door opened, and Elena heard the one sound she dreaded most, the confident click of her nephew Martin's Italian leather shoes crossing the threshold, followed by his sigh of barely concealed satisfaction. What was Martin about to say that Elena dreaded hearing most? The leather of the visitor's chair groaned as Martin settled into it. "Well, Aunt Elena," he said, his voice carrying that particular blend of false warmth she had grown to despise over the years. "Here we are." He paused. She heard the soft tap of his finger against his phone's screen, checking messages, probably even in this moment. Martin never could focus on anything for more than 30 seconds. "The doctors say you can't hear me, but I'm going to talk anyway. Seems like the thing to do." Another tap against the screen. "Though I suppose if you could hear me, this would all be rather awkward, wouldn't it?" He laughed softly at his own joke. Elena felt something twist inside her chest. "The board is meeting tomorrow. Given the circumstances, they've asked me to step in as interim director of the foundation." His voice was casual, almost bored, as though he were discussing the weather rather than the seizure of her life's work. "It's really the only practical solution. Someone has to keep things running." She heard him shift in the chair, heard the rustle of expensive fabric against leather. "Your attorney called this morning. Apparently you never updated your will after Uncle Richard died." He paused, let the words hang in the air. "Still leaves everything to him, which means it defaults to next of kin under the intestacy laws." Another soft laugh, this one with an edge of genuine amusement. "That would be me. Funny how these things work out, isn't it?" Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him about the missing funds she had discovered 3 weeks ago. $847,000 redirected from the scholarship fund into a subsidiary account that traced back to a shell company in Delaware. She wanted to tell him about the charity galas that cost twice what they raised, about the grants that never reached their intended recipients, about the pattern of theft she had been documenting in preparation for the board meeting that was supposed to happen next week. The board meeting where she had planned to present her evidence. The board meeting where she had planned to have him removed, but her body refused to obey. She lay silent while her nephew, her thief of a nephew, discussed his inheritance with the casual confidence of a man who had already won. "I'll take good care of everything," Martin continued. "The foundation, the house, the investments, all of it." He leaned closer. She felt the displacement of air against her skin. "You don't have to worry about a thing." She heard him stand, heard his footsteps move around the room. He was examining something, her jewelry probably. The Cartier bracelet on the nightstand, the pearl earrings her mother had given her, the emerald ring Richard had slipped onto her finger 48 years ago. The soft click of his phone camera confirmed her suspicion. "These are quite lovely," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Should really be in a safe. Can't be too careful in hospitals." He was cataloging, making inventory, already treating her possessions as his own. She heard him lean closer, felt his breath against her ear. "I always knew it would work out this way, Aunt Elena, one way or another." His voice was barely a whisper now, intimate and cold. "You were always so careful, so controlled, so certain you'd live forever, but here we are." The door opened, a nurse probably come to check the monitors. Martin's voice shifted instantly, became warm and concerned. "Just spending some time with her. It's so hard seeing her like this." "Of course, Mr. Vance, take all the time you need." The door closed. Martin's performance dropped away. "Well," he said, his tone returning to business-like efficiency, "I should let you rest. Big day tomorrow, lots of paperwork to sign." He patted her hand once, a gesture of possession rather than affection. "Don't you worry about anything. I'll handle it all from here." His footsteps crossed to the door. He paused at the threshold. "Sweet dreams, Aunt Elena." The door clicked shut behind him. Elena lay in the darkness of her own skull, feeling something break apart inside her. Not hope exactly, hope had been fading since she first understood her condition. This was something deeper. This was the fracture of meaning itself. She had spent her life building the foundation, building her reputation, building a legacy she thought would matter. She had sacrificed for it, sacrificed time, sacrificed relationships, sacrificed possibilities she never allowed herself to examine too closely. She had told herself it was worth it. She had told herself the work would outlast her, would continue to help people long after she was gone. But now Martin would take it all. Martin would strip the foundation for parts, redirect the funds, dissolve 40 years of work into his own bank accounts. Everything she had built would become nothing more than fuel for his lifestyle, and there was nothing she could do. She heard him lean closer, heard the soft click of his phone camera, and understood with cold certainty that he was photographing her jewelry, already cataloging what would soon be his. The visitors arrived in waves over the next 2 days, and each wave stripped away another layer of the life Elena thought she had built. First came her bridge club, 4 women she had known for decades, women who had sat at her dining table and drunk her wine and called themselves her friends. Lena heard them enter in a flutter of perfume and whispered gossip, their heels clicking against the tile like a flock of hungry birds. "She looks so peaceful," one of them said. Margaret, probably. She was always the one who spoke first, who set the tone for the group. "Peaceful, she looks dead." That was Claire. Elena recognized the voice of the woman who had called herself Elena's closest friend for 15 years. "I mean not dead, but you know, gone." "Claire, what? We're all thinking it." Claire's heels moved closer to the bed. Elena felt her presence like a cold shadow. "The doctors said there's no higher brain function. She's not in there anymore." A long pause. Then Claire spoke again, her voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "Did you notice the bracelet on the nightstand? The Cartier one she always wore?" "Claire, honestly, I always thought that bracelet would look better on me. Do you think anyone would notice if it went missing?" They laughed. Both of them laughed. Elena heard it from inside her prison of flesh, the bright, careless laughter of women she had trusted, women she had supported through divorces and diseases and disappointments. She had written them letters of recommendation, had donated to their children's schools, had shown up at their doors with food when tragedy struck. And now they stood at her bedside and joked about stealing her jewelry. "You're terrible," Margaret said, but she was still laughing. "I'm practical. She won't need it where she's going." The conversation drifted to other matters, whose husband was having an affair, whose daughter had married poorly, whose investment portfolio had taken a hit. Elena lay silent through all of it, invisible and unimportant, already erased from the social equations she had once anchored. When they left, they didn't say goodbye to her. They said goodbye to each other, already planning their next lunch, their next outing, their next gathering from which she would be permanently absent. The door closed behind them, and Elena felt something die inside her. The board members came next, 3 men in expensive suits who had nodded through her proposals for years, who had accepted her leadership without question, who had never once challenged her vision for the foundation. Now they stood in her hospital room and revealed themselves. "The property holdings are substantial," one of them said. Robert Chen, chairman of the investment committee, prime real estate in 3 states. "We'll need to determine fair market value. The endowment accounts to $32 million last I checked." That was James Whitfield, the treasurer, a man who had wept at Richard's funeral, who had called the Vance Foundation a beacon of hope in dark times. Has anyone located the original foundation charter? There may be clauses about dissolution procedures. Dissolution. They were already planning to shut it down. The nephew seems capable enough. Business degree from Penn, isn't it? Something like that. He's been on the board for 5 years, knows the organization, knows the money, you mean? Soft laughter, the laughter of men who understood each other. Well, whatever happens, we need to protect our fiduciary positions. Can't have any liability tracing back to us. Agreed. Let the lawyers sort out the charitable assets. We just need to ensure a clean handoff. They spent 20 minutes in her room. Not once did any of them ask about her prognosis. Not once did any of them suggest pursuing aggressive treatment or exploring whether her condition might be temporary. Not once did any of them speak to her, only about her, as though she were a line item on a balance sheet, an asset to be liquidated. When they left, Elena understood something she had never allowed herself to see before. She had given these men her trust, her leadership, her vision. She had believed they shared her commitment to helping others. But they had only ever been managing their portfolios, protecting their positions, using the foundation as a social credential. She had been a tool, nothing more. A hospital administrator visited on the second day. Elena heard her enter with the efficient click of sensible heels, heard her settle into the chair with a creak of synthetic fabric. "Mrs. Vance," the woman began, though she clearly didn't expect a response. "I'm Patricia Hensley, Director of Patient Services. I wanted to discuss your care plan going forward." The phrases that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. Persistent vegetative state, quality of life considerations, long-term care options, transfer to appropriate facility. Given your nephew's preferences, he is listed as your medical proxy. We believe the most appropriate course would be transfer to the Whitmore Institute. It's a reputable facility upstate, specialized in long-term care for patients in your condition. Upstate. A warehouse for the dying. Elena knew the place, had donated to it years ago, had toured its facilities with polite horror. Clean, professional, efficient, and utterly devoid of hope. The transfer is being scheduled for later this week. Your nephew has already begun the paperwork. Later this week. A few more days of consciousness, of hearing, of being alive inside her own mind. And then what? Sedation. Isolation. A slow fade into the darkness she had been fighting. If you have any concerns, well. Patricia Hensley laughed softly at her own absurdity. I suppose that's not really relevant, is it? But the process is all quite standard. Nothing to worry about. She patted Elena's hand once and left. Nothing to worry about. Elena lay in the darkness, feeling the last fragments of hope drain away. Her nephew was stealing her legacy. Her friends were coveting her possessions. Her board members were planning dissolution. Her doctors had given up. And in a few days, she would be transferred to a facility where no one would talk to her, no one would visit her, no one would notice when she finally stopped breathing. She had spent 73 years building something she thought mattered, a foundation, a reputation, a name. But she had never built the one thing that might have saved her: real connection, real friendship, real love that went deeper than transactions and social status and the exchange of favors. By the time the last visitor left, Elena had stopped trying to fight the darkness pressing in from all sides. If this was what her life had actually been, what was the point of waking up to reclaim it? The clipboard struck the bedside table with a sharp crack. Room 412, Vance, Elena, stroke with severe brain damage, non-responsive. The voice belonged to someone Elena had never heard before, clipped, efficient, already moving through a mental checklist. I'm reviewing her file for the care transition team. A second voice, closer to the door. The nephew called again this morning, wants to know how quickly we can arrange the transfer. I'm sure he does. Papers shuffled. Has anyone discussed options with the family? There's only the nephew. He's listed as next of kin, emergency contact, and healthcare proxy. He signed the DNR paperwork yesterday. Elena's mind seized on the words, DNR, do not resuscitate. Martin had signed away her right to be saved if her heart stopped, her lungs failed, her body gave out. He had signed it without hesitation, without consultation, without knowing or caring that she was listening. The efficient voice continued. What about long-term placement? Has anyone started that conversation? Dr. Peterson mentioned Whitmore. It's a good facility, very peaceful. They specialize in persistent vegetative cases. Elena knew Whitmore. She had toured it once, years ago, when the foundation was considering a grant for their therapy garden. She remembered the corridors, clean, quiet, smelling of disinfectant and resignation. She remembered the patients in their beds, motionless, eyes open or closed. It hardly seemed to matter. The staff had been professional, even kind. But the place had felt like a waiting room for death, and Elena had left after an hour, writing a check for the garden but never returning. Now she would become one of those patients, one of those bodies in those beds, waiting for an ending that might take months or years to arrive. The transfer coordinator wants to schedule a bed for early next week, the clipboard voice said, but if the nephew pushes, we might be able to expedite. There's no medical reason to keep her here. She's stable. She's just, a pause, she's not going to improve. The words landed like a door slamming shut. Not going to improve, they had decided. Not based on hope or possibility, but on statistics and liability and the need for beds. Elena Vance, 73 years old, founder of the Vance Foundation, widow, philanthropist, prisoner, had been reduced to a logistics problem. The two voices moved toward the door, still discussing details Elena could no longer process. Transfer authorization forms, insurance coverage for long-term care, the nephew's contact information for final arrangements. Then they were gone, and Elena was alone with the beeping monitors and the weight of her own silence. She tried to feel angry. Anger had always served her well. It had built the foundation, sustained her through Richard's illness, carried her through decades of board meetings and fundraising galas and the thousand small battles of running an organization. But the anger wouldn't come. She reached for it and found only exhaustion. What was the point of fighting? The foundation would fall to Martin. Her estate would be picked clean by the vultures who had called themselves her friends, and she would lie in a bed at Whitmore, silent and still, until her body finally surrendered what her mind could not. Elena felt herself letting go, not of life exactly, but of the desperate grip she had maintained since waking in this darkness. Perhaps it was easier this way. Perhaps the mercy was in the surrender. The day passed in fragments, nurses checking vitals, someone adjusting her IV, the distant sounds of the hospital carrying on without her. She floated in a gray space that was neither sleep nor waking, neither hope nor despair. Just waiting, then night fell. And on the third night, the door opened with a different sound entirely, softer, more deliberate, and footsteps unlike any she had heard before entered her room. These footsteps moved with purpose, but without haste. Soft-soled shoes crossing tile, each step placed with the careful intention of someone who had learned to move through spaces without disturbing them. And beneath that rhythm, another set of footsteps, smaller, lighter, trying very hard to be silent and not quite succeeding. "Papa, is this the lady?" "Yes, Theo. But remember, we must be very quiet. We're not supposed to be here." The voice was deep and resonant, carrying an accent Elena couldn't immediately place, something musical in the vowels, a rhythm that spoke of somewhere far from Connecticut. West African, she realized. Nigerian, perhaps. She heard the man settle into the chair beside her bed, heard the soft creak of his weight against the vinyl. The child remained standing, shuffling slightly, the small restless movements of a boy trying to obey instructions he didn't fully understand. "My name is Samuel Okonkwo," the man said softly. "I am a security guard here at the hospital. I work the night shift, so you probably have not seen me before." A security guard. The words didn't match the voice, too educated, too deliberate, carrying weight that went beyond his stated position. "I read about you in the newspaper," Samuel continued. "About your foundation, the scholarships you created. The article said you might not recover, and I thought I have to come. I have to say the words, even if she cannot hear them." His chair shifted closer. "My son received one of your grants last year for his school supplies, his books." He paused, and Elena heard something catch in his throat. It was not a large amount to someone like you, I'm sure, but for us, it meant everything. The Foundation's education grants. Elena knew them only as line items, $500 here, $300 there, a program she had designed to help families who fell through the cracks of larger scholarship systems. She had never met a single recipient. They were statistics, evidence of impact, numbers to cite in annual reports and donor presentations. Now one of those numbers was sitting beside her bed in the darkness. "Thank you for my backpack," the child said suddenly. "It's red. Red is my favorite color." "Theo," Samuel's voice carried gentle reproach, "you said to say thank you if I ever met her." "I did say that," a soft sound that might have been a smile. "You are right." The boy moved closer, his small presence somehow filling the room in a way the parade of adult visitors never had. Elena felt something stir in her chest, not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. Attention, interest, a crack in the gray numbness that had settled over her. "We should not stay long," Samuel said. "But I wanted you to know that your kindness reached us, that it mattered. Even if you cannot hear me, I wanted to say the words aloud." He rose from the chair, and Elena felt a flash of something that might have been panic. "Don't go." The thought came unbidden, surprising her with its intensity. "Don't leave me here alone." But Samuel did not move toward the door. Instead, he settled back as if he had changed his mind. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into something more intimate. "In my country," Samuel said quietly, "I was a surgeon," and Elena's understanding of the man beside her shifted entirely. "I trained for 12 years, Samuel continued, his voice carrying the weight of a story he had told himself many times but perhaps never spoken aloud. "Medical school in Lagos, then my residency in Ibadan. I specialized in trauma surgery, the emergencies, the accidents, the cases where minutes mattered and steady hands could mean the difference between life and death." Elena listened with an attention she had not given to any visitor since waking in this room. The contrast between what this man had been and what he now was struck her with unexpected force. "I was good," Samuel said, and the words held no arrogance, only the quiet certainty of someone stating a fact. "I saved many lives. I trained younger surgeons. I built something I was proud of." He paused, and Elena heard Theo shift beside him, settling onto the floor with the patient acceptance of a child accustomed to waiting. "But when I came here," Samuel's voice tightened, "my credentials are not recognized. 12 years of training, thousands of surgeries, and I must start again from the beginning. The exams, the residency applications, the years of work before anyone will let me hold a scalpel again." The injustice of it burned in Elena's chest. She knew this story, had read about it in policy papers and foundation reports, qualified professionals from other countries reduced to menial labor, their expertise invisible to the systems that should have welcomed them. But knowing it abstractly was different from hearing it in the darkness, from a man who had every reason for bitterness and carried none in his voice. "And in the meantime," Samuel continued, "my son needs food, he needs clothes. He needs a father who is present, not lost in anger at what cannot be changed. Papa always says patience is the longest road but the safest," Theo offered from the floor. "That's right, son." Elena heard the smile in Samuel's voice. "My grandmother taught me that. She was a healer in our village, not a doctor, but a woman who understood that medicine is as much about presence as it is about treatment. She would sit with the sick for hours, just talking, just being there. She said the body heals faster when it knows it is not alone." He leaned forward, and Elena felt the air shift as he drew closer to her bed. "So I work here at night, walking these halls while my son sleeps at my sister's apartment. And during the day I study, the medical textbooks, the exam preparations, the endless requirements. It will take years, but I will do it. I will become a doctor again. And then we'll have a house," Theo said, "with a yard and a dog." "Perhaps a dog," Samuel agreed. "We will see." Elena felt tears gathering behind her closed lids, tears for this man who had lost everything and still spoke of the future with hope, tears for the boy who dreamed of yards and dogs while his father studied at kitchen tables in small apartments. She had spent decades writing checks and reviewing grant applications, believing she understood the lives she was trying to help. She had understood nothing. "That is why we came tonight, Mrs. Vance," Samuel said. "I wanted you to know that your foundation's grant, that small amount of money, gave my son books for school. It gave him supplies. It gave him the chance to learn without shame." His voice dropped lower. "It gave me hope that there was kindness in this country, even for people like us." He was quiet for a moment. Then his tone shifted, became more urgent. "I also wanted to tell you something else," Samuel said. "Something I have observed." Elena felt her attention sharpen to a point, every fragment of consciousness focused on Samuel's voice. "I have been watching, Mrs. Vance." His words came slowly now, weighted with significance. "At night, when I make my rounds, I pass your room many times, and I see things. I see who comes to visit you and how they behave when they think no one is looking." The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Theo was quiet on the floor, perhaps sensing the shift in his father's tone. "I see the nephew who comes in the afternoon," Samuel continued. "The one with the expensive shoes and the cold eyes. I see how he looks at this room, not at you, but at the things around you. 2 days ago, I watched him through the window as he took photographs of your jewelry, of the cards on your table, of documents in your purse." Eleanor's heart would have raced if it still obeyed her. Martin, cataloging her belongings. Martin, already preparing to strip her room of anything valuable. "I see the women who call themselves your friends," Samuel went on. "I heard them laughing about your bracelet, about whether anyone would notice if it went missing. They spoke of you as if you were already dead, Mrs. Vance, as if you were furniture to be divided." The words landed like blows, each one confirming what Elena had heard herself, but somehow made more real by Samuel's witness. She was not imagining the betrayals. Someone else had seen them too. "And I see the board members, the administrators, the doctors who check their clipboards and speak of quality of life and appropriate facilities." His voice hardened slightly. "They have given up on you, all of them. They have decided what you are, and they are not interested in being wrong." Samuel paused. When he spoke again, his tone had changed, softer now, more intimate. "But I also see something else, Mrs. Vance, something no one else has seen." Elena felt the air thicken around her. "3 nights ago, after everyone had gone, I came to check on you. It was very late, perhaps 2 in the morning. The floor was quiet. I stood in your doorway just watching, the way my grandmother used to watch her patients when they slept." He leaned closer, and Elena could smell soap and coffee, the honest sense of someone who worked long hours. "And I saw your finger move." The words hung in the darkness like a revelation. "Just slightly," Samuel continued. "Just for a moment. Perhaps a millimeter, no more, and then it stopped and you were still again." Elena's mind reeled. Her finger had moved. 3 nights ago in the darkness, her body had obeyed her for one brief instant, and someone had been watching. "I am not a neurologist, Mrs. Vance. Perhaps I imagined it. Perhaps it was a reflex, the random firing of damaged nerves. But in my years of training, I learned to trust my eyes." His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "I believe you are still in there. I believe you can hear me right now." Elena felt tears gathering behind her closed lids, tears that could not fall, that had no way to signal the storm breaking inside her. She wanted to scream, to move, to prove him right. But her body remained still, locked in its terrible silence. "I will not tell the doctors," Samuel said. "That is not my place. I am a security guard here, not a physician. If I report what I saw, they will dismiss it. They will say I am untrained, that I don't understand, that reflexes can look like voluntary movement to an uneducated eye." His voice carried old wounds, the dismissals, the condescension, the weight of being seen as less than what he was. "But I will come back, Mrs. Vance, every night, and I will talk to you because everyone deserves a witness." His hand touched hers briefly, warm, real, the first human contact that had felt like connection rather than clinical necessity. "Everyone deserves to be seen." Theo stirred on the floor. "Papa, why are you whispering?" "Because some things are between friends, son, even friends who cannot answer." Elena felt something shift inside her, a door that had been locked beginning to open. For days she had been surrounded by people who spoke about her, at her, over her. Martin with his gloating calculations, Claire with her petty theft, the administrators with their transfer forms and facility recommendations. but Samuel spoke to her. He believed she was present, and he addressed that presence with respect, with dignity, with the recognition she had spent 73 years failing to receive from people who should have known her far better. "We must go now," Samuel said softly. "My shift continues, and this one needs his sleep." She heard him lifting Theo, heard the child's sleepy murmur of protest. "But I will return tomorrow night, Mrs. Vance, and the night after. For as long as you are here, you will not be forgotten." He moved toward the door, his soft-soled shoes barely whispering against the tile. "I will come back," Samuel whispered, his hand briefly touching hers. "Every night, because you are not invisible, Mrs. Vance, and I will not let you be forgotten." Samuel returned the next night, and the night after, always with Theo, always in the quiet hours after the day shift nurses had completed their rounds and the hospital had settled into its nocturnal rhythm. He brought stories. "Let me tell you about the village where I grew up," he said on the fourth night, settling into the chair that had become his accustomed place. It was called Ekiti, in the southwest of Nigeria, small, perhaps 2,000 people, but to me as a child it was the entire world. Theo was curled on the floor beside him, wrapped in a blanket Samuel had brought from home, already drowsing. But Alina was fully present, drinking in every word. My grandmother was the heart of that village. Everyone came to her for medicine, for advice, for comfort. She knew every plant that grew in the forest, every remedy passed down through generations. But her greatest gift was simply her presence. She would sit with the sick for hours, holding their hands, telling them stories, reminding them that they were not alone. He paused, and Alina heard him shift in his chair. "She taught me that healing is not only about the body. The body follows the spirit," she used to say. "If the spirit gives up, the body will follow. But if the spirit has something to hold on to, hope, love, connection, then the body will fight." Alina thought about her own spirit. For days it had been surrendering, sinking into the gray nothing of despair. But Samuel's visits had given it something to hold on to. She found herself counting the hours between his departures and his returns, measuring her days by the soft sound of his footsteps in the corridor. "I met Amara when I was in medical school," Samuel continued, and his voice softened at the name. "She was studying to be a teacher. We would meet in the library, both of us too poor to afford coffee, sharing textbooks and dreams." He laughed softly. "She was stubborn, so stubborn. When she decided something, there was no changing her mind. She decided she was going to marry me before I even knew I loved her. She simply announced it one day, 'Samuel, you are going to be my husband,' and that was that." Theo stirred on the floor. "Tell about the wedding, Papa. You've heard about the wedding 100 times. I like it." Samuel's voice warmed. "The wedding was the happiest day of my life. Amara wore white with flowers in her hair. Her family came from 3 villages away. We danced until morning." He was quiet for a long moment. "She died giving birth to Theo," he said finally. "There were complications. The hospital was too far, the equipment too old, the blood supply insufficient. I was a surgeon, and I could not save my own wife." The words hung in the darkness, heavy with a grief that had never fully healed. "When I held my son for the first time, he had his mother's eyes, and I knew I had to leave Nigeria. There was nothing left for me there but memories and pain, so I brought Theo here to America to start again, to give him the life Amara would have wanted him to have." "I'm making a drawing for Papa's birthday," Theo whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "It's a picture of our whole family, me, Papa, and Mama watching from heaven." "Show Mrs. Vance the drawing," Samuel said gently. Alina heard Theo rise from his nest of blankets, heard his small feet pad across the floor to her bedside. She imagined him standing there in the dim light from the corridor, a sleepy child holding up his artwork to a woman who could not open her eyes to see it. "It's not finished yet," Theo said. "I still have to color Mama's dress. She always wore yellow." "Papa says yellow was her favorite." "Your mama did love yellow," Samuel agreed. "She said it was the color of sunshine and hope." "And there's a rainbow," Theo continued, his voice brightening, "because Mama loved rainbows. She used to say they were messages from heaven, so I put a rainbow in the picture so Mama can see us from where she is." Alina felt something fracture in her chest, a hairline crack running through the walls she had built over decades. She had never had children. It had been a choice, or so she had told herself. The foundation demanded too much. Richard's health had required her attention. There was never a right time, and then there was no more time at all. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? 40 years ago, there had been a child. A daughter born before Elena married Richard, before the foundation existed, before she became the woman everyone thought they knew. She had been 22 and terrified, just starting her career in philanthropy, told by everyone around her that a baby would end everything she was building. So she had made a choice. She had signed the papers, handed over the tiny bundle she had held for only an hour, and walked away. She had never spoken of it to anyone, not Richard, not her closest friends, not even herself in the quiet hours of the night. She had sealed that door and refused to look at it. But Theo's voice, speaking of his mother with such easy love, such uncomplicated grief, broke something loose in Elena that had been locked away for 4 decades. "My best friend Marcus says the drawing is dumb," Theo was saying. "He says you can't put dead people in pictures, but Papa says you can put anyone you love in a picture because art is about feelings, not rules." "Marcus is a good friend," Samuel said, "but he is wrong about this." "That's what I said," Theo yawned. "Mrs. Vance, do you like rainbows?" The question was asked with the unself-conscious directness of childhood. He expected no answer, and yet somehow the asking itself felt like a gift, the assumption that she was present, that her preferences mattered, that she was a person worth addressing rather than a body taking up space. "I think she does like rainbows," Samuel said softly. "I think she has spent her whole life trying to create them for other people." Something cracked open in Elena's chest, a door she had sealed 40 years ago when she had made a choice she never allowed herself to revisit. "Come sit with me, Theo." Samuel's voice was quiet, weighted. "I want to tell Mrs. Vance something important." Elena heard the child settle beside his father, heard the rustle of the blanket being adjusted. The room felt different tonight, charged somehow, as if Samuel had come to this visit with intention. "When Amara died," Samuel began, "I wanted to die too." The words fell into the darkness like stones dropped into deep water. "I held my son in my arms, this tiny, screaming baby who needed everything from me, and I felt nothing. Not love, not grief, not even pain, just emptiness. A void where my heart used to be." Theo made a small sound and Samuel's voice softened. "You know this story, son, but I have never told anyone else. Not my sister, not my friends. Not the counselors who tried to help me in those first terrible months. But I am telling Mrs. Vance now because I think she needs to hear it." Elena felt her attention narrow to a point, every fragment of her trapped consciousness focused on his words. "I thought about ending it," Samuel continued. "Many times in those first weeks, I would stand at the window of our apartment, holding Theo, and think how easy it would be to let go, to stop fighting, to join Amara wherever she had gone." His voice caught, but then one night, very late, Theo woke up crying. He was hungry, wet, miserable, everything a newborn should be. I picked him up and I was so tired, so empty, so lost. And I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since Amara died. The room seemed to hold its breath. He had her eyes, Amara's eyes. And as I looked at him, he stopped crying, just stopped. And he looked back at me, this tiny infant who shouldn't have been able to focus on anything. And I swear to you, Mrs. Vance, he saw me, not just looked at me, saw me, the real me, the broken me, the me that wanted to die. Samuel's voice trembled. And in that moment I understood I was enough. I had to be enough because this child needed me. Not the surgeon, not the success, not the man I used to be, just me, present, trying, alive. Elena felt tears gathering behind her closed eyes, tears that would not fall, that had no way to signal the emotion breaking loose inside her. "That is why I come here, Mrs. Vance. Not because you gave my son a grant, not because your foundation helped us, but because I know what it is like to be trapped in darkness, to feel like there is no reason to keep fighting." His hand found hers, warm and real. "And I know what it is like to be seen. To have someone look at you and recognize that you are still there." Theo's voice came soft and worried. "Papa, why are you sad?" "I am not sad, son. I am grateful, grateful that we are here, grateful that we can be a comfort to Mrs. Vance even if she doesn't know it." But Elena did know it. For the first time since the stroke, something was surging through her that was not despair, not resignation, not the gray nothing of surrender. It was something fiercer. Samuel's story mirrored her own darkness, the desire to give up, the emptiness that made surrender seem like mercy. But he had found his way back through connection, through the simple act of being seen by someone who needed him. And now he was here, seeing her, believing she was still present, offering witness when everyone else had given up. "I am grateful that we are here," Samuel said softly, and Alina felt something surge through her that was not strength exactly, but will, pure, desperate will to live. The fifth morning announced itself with the sharp efficiency of bureaucracy in motion. Alina heard it before she was fully awake from the shallow drift that passed for sleep, clicking heels, moving with purpose down the corridor, the rustle of papers being organized, voices speaking in the clipped tones of people executing a plan. The door to her room opened without ceremony. Room 412, Vance, Alina, transfer scheduled for 1400 hours. A woman's voice, administrative, reading from a clipboard. Transport team is confirmed. Whitmore has the bed ready. The nephew signed everything yesterday afternoon. Healthcare proxy authorization, transfer consent, the works. He was very efficient. A soft laugh from someone near the door. I'm sure he was. Alina's mind seized on the words. 1400 hours, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She had no way to know what time it was now, but the morning sounds of the hospital, the breakfast cart she'd heard earlier, the shift change announcements, suggested she had only hours before she disappeared. Has anyone contacted other family members? The second voice again, younger, perhaps a nurse assigned to help with the transfer. There are no other family members. The clipboard voice was matter of fact, just the nephew. He's listed as sole next of kin. No other family. The words echoed in Alina's trapped consciousness. Martin had made certain of that, hadn't he? He had positioned himself carefully over the years, cultivating the image of devoted nephew while systematically ensuring that no one else would have standing to challenge his authority. And now he had signed her away to Whitmore. Alina knew what that meant. She would be sedated for the transport, standard procedure for patients in her supposed condition. Once at the facility, she would be maintained on medications that would push her further from the surface of consciousness, deeper into the darkness she had been fighting to escape. The staff there would be kind, perhaps, but they would not talk to her. They would not believe she could hear. They would not spend their nights sitting by her bed, telling her stories about villages in Nigeria and children who draw rainbows. Samuel would never find her. The thought pierced through her numbness with physical force. For 4 nights he had been her anchor, the voice in the darkness that reminded her she existed, that she mattered, that there was still reason to fight. If she was taken from this room, she would be taken from him. And she would die alone, unseen, exactly as she had feared. The administrative voices moved toward the door, discussing logistics Alina could barely process. Medication protocols, insurance authorizations, the nephew's contact information for final notifications. Then they were gone, and Alina was alone with the ticking clock she couldn't see and the deadline she couldn't stop. She tried to move her finger the way Samuel had described. She focused every fragment of concentration on her right hand, visualizing the muscles contracting, the tiny motion that might catch someone's attention. But her body remained still, locked in the same terrible silence it had maintained for 5 days. The morning stretched on. Nurses came to check her vitals, to adjust her IV, to speak over her in the third person about the upcoming transfer. None of them looked at her face. None of them noticed that she was screaming inside. Then from somewhere down the corridor, she heard a voice that made her heart surge. Samuel's voice, but different, not the measured calm she had come to know. This was urgent, desperate, edged with fear. "Please, I just need to see her one more time. Sir, she's being transferred. Family only." The words came from somewhere outside Alina's door, close enough that she could hear every syllable. Samuel's response was immediate. "I understand. I'm not asking for a long visit, just a moment, just to say goodbye. I'm sorry, but the policy is clear. The patient's nephew has restricted access to immediate family during the transfer process. I am not asking for much." Samuel's voice cracked slightly. She has no family who cares for her. Her nephew photographs her jewelry and counts her assets. I have seen it. I have watched it happen. She deserves one person who speaks to her with kindness before she goes. A pause. Elena could hear her own heart monitor beeping its steady rhythm, could feel the seconds draining away like water through a cracked vessel. 5 minutes, Samuel pressed. Please. I could lose my job. The other voice, female, conflicted. 2 minutes then, just 2 minutes. I will not touch anything. I will not interfere with the transfer. I only want to say goodbye. Another pause, longer this time. Elena found herself straining toward the door as if physical effort could influence the outcome of the negotiation happening in the hallway. 2 minutes. The woman's voice was resigned. That's all I can give you, and you didn't get this from me? Thank you, thank you. The door opened. Footsteps rushed toward her, Samuel's soft-soled shoes moving faster than she had ever heard them. And behind him, lighter steps. Theo. He had brought Theo. Mrs. Vance. Samuel's voice was thick with emotion as he reached her bedside. I don't know if you can hear me. I have never known for certain. But I could not let them take you without, he stopped, gathered himself, without telling you what you have meant to us. Elena felt his hand close over hers. Warm, real. The same hand that had covered hers night after night, offering presence when everyone else offered absence. Papa, Theo whispered somewhere nearby, why are we rushing? Because we only have a moment, son, and some things must be said, even if there is no time to say them properly. The door opened, footsteps rushed toward her, and Elena knew, 120 seconds to prove she was still alive, or an eternity of silent burial. Samuel drew a shaky breath and began to speak, his words tumbling out with the desperate clarity of a man who knows he may never have another chance. When I was young, my grandmother told me stories about the baobab trees that grow in the African savanna. You have seen pictures, perhaps, those enormous trees with trunks as wide as houses, branches that reach toward the sky like arms raised in prayer. His hand tightened on hers. She said some people are like baobab trees. They stand so tall, so strong, that everyone comes to shelter beneath them. The travelers rest in their shade. The animals nest in their branches. The children play among their roots. His voice dropped lower, but no one ever thinks to ask if the tree is thirsty. Elena felt the words land somewhere deep inside her, in a place that had been sealed for decades. You have been a baobab tree, Mrs. Vance. Your foundation, your scholarships, your grants, you have sheltered so many people. My son, my family, hundreds of others you will never meet. He paused. But who has sheltered you? Who has asked what you need, what you want, what might nourish your spirit instead of always giving from it? Theo's small voice came from somewhere near the foot of the bed. Papa says you're a good person, Mrs. Vance. He says good people sometimes forget to let other people be good to them. Samuel made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, out of the mouths of children. He leaned closer, and Elena could feel his breath against her cheek. I came here tonight, these last few nights, because I wanted to give something back, not to repay you. There is no repaying kindness, but to witness you, to see you. Not the philanthropist, not the foundation director, not the woman whose picture appears in newspapers. You, his voice broke. The woman who lies in this bed, alone and surrounded by vultures, who deserves to know that she mattered. He squeezed her hand again. You mattered to us, Mrs. Vance, not for your money, not for your name, for your spirit. For the kindness that reached a stranger's child when no one was watching. For being the kind of person who builds things that help people, even people she will never meet. The 2 minutes were bleeding away. Elena could feel it, could sense the woman in the hallway checking her watch, preparing to end this final goodbye. I saw you, Samuel whispered, his face so close to hers that she could feel the warmth of his tears falling onto her cheek. I saw you, and I will not forget you. Whatever happens now, wherever they take you, know that you were seen, that Theo and I will carry you with us, that you were not invisible. Elena focused every fragment of consciousness she possessed on the hand beneath Samuel's palm, on the warmth of his skin against hers, and something that had been locked began to move. It started in her finger, the same finger Samuel had seen move 3 nights ago, the tiny motion he had trusted enough to believe she was still present. Elena concentrated on that finger with every shred of will she possessed. She imagined the neural pathway from her brain to her hand, visualized the electrical impulse traveling along damaged nerves, fighting through scar tissue and swelling to reach the muscles that had refused to obey her for 5 days. Move. The command was absolute, primal, stripped of everything but raw intention. Move. Her finger twitched. Samuel's breath caught. Mrs. Vance, she couldn't stop to acknowledge him. The finger had moved, but that wasn't enough. She needed more. She needed them to see her, really see her, to understand that she was conscious and present and fighting. She focused on her wrist. The muscles felt like they were encased in concrete, like her body had forgotten the fundamental mechanics of motion. But she pushed against the resistance, concentrated until her inner vision, still trapped behind closed eyelids, narrowed to a single point of light. Her wrist shifted, just slightly. Just enough, Papa, Theo's voice rose in pitch. Her hand, Samuel's grip tightened. I see it, son, I see it. Elena gathered herself for the final effort. Her eyelids, the heaviest things in the world, weighted with 5 days of paralysis, with neurological damage, with everything the doctors had said was impossible. She thought about Theo's drawing, about Amara watching from heaven, about the rainbow that stretched across the paper because a boy believed his mother could see it. She thought about Samuel, the surgeon who walked hospital halls at night and still called himself grateful, who had lost everything and chosen hope anyway, who had sat beside her bed night after night speaking to a woman he wasn't certain could hear him. She thought about being seen. Her eyelids opened. Light flooded in, blinding at first, then resolving into shapes and colors. The ceiling, white and institutional, the monitors blinking their steady rhythm. The window, gray with October clouds. And Samuel's face, inches from her own, tears streaming down his cheeks, his kind eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Vance, he breathed. You're. She saw Theo behind him, the boy's face transformed with wonder, his small hands pressed to his mouth. She saw the nurse appearing in the doorway, clipboard falling from frozen fingers. She saw the world she had been locked out of for 5 days, restored to her in a rush of color and light, and the beautiful, terrible weight of being present. Papa. Theo shouted somewhere beyond Elena's blurred vision. She's awake, and Elena forced her cracked lips apart, fighting to release the words that would claim her life back. Her throat burned. Her lips felt like cracked leather, her tongue thick and uncooperative. She had not spoken in 5 days, and her voice had forgotten its own shape. But Samuel was leaning close, his face wet with tears, his hands still wrapped around hers. And somewhere behind him, alarms were beginning to sound, footsteps rushing down corridors, the machinery of the hospital lurching into motion. None of it mattered, only this moment, only these words. You, the sound that emerged from her throat was barely a whisper, a rasp of damaged vocal cords forcing air past unused muscles. Samuel leaned closer. I'm here, Mrs. Vance. She tried again, pushing through the pain, through the impossible effort of forcing her body to obey. You saw me. His face crumpled. The tears flowed freely now, and he made no effort to wipe them away. I saw you, he said, his voice breaking. I saw you. Then the room filled with chaos. Medical staff rushed through the door, shouting instructions, pushing past Samuel and Theo to reach the bed. Someone was calling for Dr. Peterson. Someone else was canceling the transfer, shouting into a phone about changed circumstances, updated status, the need for immediate neurological evaluation. But Elena kept her gaze fixed on Samuel through all of it. He had been pushed back from her bedside, Theo clutched against his leg, both of them watching her with expressions of wonder and relief. He mouthed something she couldn't hear over the commotion, words she didn't need to hear because she already knew them. I saw you. She was finally seen, and that was enough. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in the hospital garden. The late October sun filtered through bare branches, casting long shadows across the grass. A blanket covered her lap. Her body was still weak, still relearning its own capabilities, and a wheelchair waited nearby. But she had insisted on walking the last few feet to this bench, on feeling the solid earth beneath her feet. Samuel stood beside her, his security uniform exchanged for civilian clothes. He had taken the day off, he said, to celebrate. Papa, can I give it to her now? Theo was practically vibrating with anticipation, clutching a piece of paper against his chest. Yes, son, you can give it to her now. The boy approached with the solemnity of a child presenting something sacred. He held out the drawing, and Alina took it with trembling fingers. 4 figures stood beneath a rainbow: a tall man, a small boy, a woman with dark hair and a yellow dress, watching from a cloud near the sun, and beside them, holding the boy's hand, a woman with silver hair and a smile. I added you, Theo said proudly, because you're part of our family now. Her looked at the drawing, the figures rendered in crayon, the rainbow a bright arc of hope across the top of the page. She looked at Samuel, whose kind eyes were bright with emotion. She looked at Theo, who was watching her with the uncomplicated love of a child who had decided she belonged. The foundation would need attention. Martin's embezzlement would have to be addressed. The board would require reforming. The will would need updating. The work she had built over 40 years would demand her strength once it returned. But all of that was for later. Right now, there was only this: a garden, a boy, a surgeon who walked hospital halls at night, and a drawing that told her everything she needed to know. Alina looked at the drawing in her hands, 4 figures standing together beneath a rainbow, one of them silver-haired and smiling, and she understood at last what it meant to be enough. Not for what she had built, not for what she had given, but simply, finally, for who she was. She was finally seen, and that was enough.